A real-life treasure hunt is now unfolding here in South Florida. Are millions of dollars worth of gold retrieved from a sunken ship hidden right under our noses?
Imagine finding wealth that could retire your kids, grandkids, and their grandkids. Tommy Thompson's passion for shipwrecks and scavenging led to him finding treasure one could only dream of. But did his life take a positive turn? The many would once they find millions worth in gold? Join us as we reveal whether Thompson is living the life of his dreams or if he's going through something far worse.
Good morning. This is a treasure hunter's dream come true. This ship sank back in 1857 with tons of gold on board. More than $50 million worth of that gold has already been recovered, and there is a whole lot more.
Thompson is known to be a very famous American treasure hunter. He was also a former oceanic engineer who gained popularity in the 1980s. His greatest achievement was discovering the SS Central America, a ship that sank in 1857 off the coast of South Carolina during a hurricane. It was carrying one of the largest documented cargoes of gold ever lost at sea. And if there's one thing about gold, it can last very long, even if it's been underwater for over a century and a half. The gold came from the California Gold Rush, which is a history lesson on its own. This was a period of intense migration and economic activity that started all the way back in 1848, when gold was first discovered at Sutter's Mill in Coloma, California. People known as 49ers from around the United States and across the globe came searching for valuable resources, hoping to achieve financial freedom. The gold rush dramatically transformed the social, economic, and political landscape of California and the United States as a whole. The period began specifically on January 24, 1848, when James W. Marshall, a carpenter working for John Sutter, a Swiss immigrant, found gold while building a sawmill along the American River. At first, he tried keeping it a secret, because if Marshall found a gold reserve that no one knew about, he could be one of the most powerful people on Earth. The word quickly spread out, though, and 49ers from every corner of Earth sailed to California and started digging. You're probably familiar with this time as shown on television and in movies where men are sieving through the dirt in the American River looking for gold nuggets. But when then U.S. President James Polk officially announced the discovery during his State of the Union address, people with all sorts of equipment were in an all-out war. Everyone wanted a piece to themselves. It was a race against time because tens of thousands of people from the eastern United States, Europe, Latin America, China, and Australia settled shop in California, hoping to score wealth. The reason some of these people are called 49ers is because the massive number of people moving to the U.S. specifically to look for gold was in 1849. After all, getting to California wasn't so easy. Reminder, airplanes did not exist. These men had to travel troubled waters for weeks on end just to avail this opportunity. A good chunk of the workers didn't even survive the trip. Some traveled by sea around the tip of South America. Others took ships to Panama, crossed the isthmus, and sailed north to California, while still others took the overland route across the U.S. By the end of 1849, California's population had surged from about 14,000 non-Native Americans to nearly 100,000. San Francisco used to be a small settlement, but with the rise in migrants, it turned into a thriving port city. The U.S. finally found a new hub for incoming miners, merchants, and goods. But just because people landed safely in California didn't mean their futures were secure immediately. Matter of fact, their work just got 1,000 times harder because they had to invest in all kinds of equipment to strike gold. When the surface-level stash was extracted by man-made tools like a pan and net, the reserve eventually exhausted itself. This was when large-scale mining companies took over and left all the migrants with nothing. Imagine coming all the way from the opposite side of the earth just to have it all go to waste. But business was booming. People realized that selling food, clothes, transportation, and even tools to miners was more profitable. Believe it or not, this is where brands like Levi Strauss and Samuel Brannan made a fortune without ever needing to mine for gold themselves. By the mid-1850s, the gold rush began to wind down as easily accessible gold deposits were depleted, and mining became increasingly industrialized. While small-scale miners were largely forced out, large companies used new techniques to continue extracting gold. Many miners either left California or settled down to other types of work. Now, the only thing luckier than striking gold during this era would be to find a ship loaded with valuables in one of your deep-sea expeditions. Cue the SS Central America, the 280-foot wooden-hulled sidewheel steamship launched in 1853. The ship was part of the United States Mail Steamship Company and was designed to transport passengers, mail, and cargo between the eastern U.S. and the West Coast during the height of the California Gold Rush. Its route was primarily between the Pacific Coast near California and the East Coast via Panama. People would travel by sea to Panama first, cross the isthmus overland, and then board Central America to complete their journey to cities like New York. In September 1857, the SS Central America embarked on what would be its final voyage. Departing from Aspinwall en route to New York, it carried 477 passengers and a crew of 101. It was also carrying 30,000 pounds of gold. To give you a better idea of how expensive this voyage was, as of 2022, 1 pound of gold is worth $22,372. That's a total of $671 million just lying there on a ship. Of course, this didn't belong to just one man. It was intended to be distributed to banks and major businesses. In 1857, the total cargo was worth over $1.6 million. If you were to factor in how different the economy was 2 centuries ago, that much money could buy you the entire country. The stock of gold had thousands of freshly minted 1857 double eagles, which are probably worth a fortune in the 21st century. It also had $20 coins, ingots, and gold in other forms. But things took a turn downward on September 9th. Central America encountered a hurricane off the coast of the Carolinas and was stuck in the sea for 2 days. The crew tried their best to maintain the very important ship, but unfortunately, the hurricane did its fair share of damage. By September 12th, the situation had become desperate. The ship was taking on water, and passengers began to panic. In a tragic turn of events, the crew and passengers attempted to bail water out manually, but it became clear that the ship was doomed. 425 passengers and crew members died when the Central America finally sank. Only 153 survivors were rescued by passing ships, making the disaster one of the deadliest maritime tragedies in U.S. history. Now, at the time, the U.S. economy was in a very fragile position because of the declining stock market and failing banks. Losing millions of dollars worth of gold made everything even worse. This was known as the Panic of 1857, one of the first major financial crises in the United States. For over a century, the exact location of Central America remained a mystery, with the wreck lying deep beneath the Atlantic Ocean. But the fact that 30,000 pounds of gold was just lying there at the bottom of the ocean led treasure hunters to new journeys. It was like the California Gold Rush all over again. But this time, scuba divers and marine enthusiasts were on the hunt for the prize. It wasn't until 1988 that Tommy Thompson made history by locating the wreck of the SS Central America. This wasn't something he just stumbled upon while diving deep into the sea. Thompson made it his goal to find that gold and used technology that most of the people from the 80s probably haven't even heard of. His team found the wreck approximately 8,000 feet below the surface, some 160 miles off the coast of South Carolina. Since he was a marine engineer with hands-on knowledge of everything that happens underwater, his experience prior to the journey helped him a lot. He worked at Battelle Memorial Institute, which is a nonprofit research organization in Columbus. There, he built an underwater robot named Nemo. He showed it off to potential investors and buyers between the years 1985 and 1986. Thompson ended up convincing 161 people and companies of the invention. He was eyeing $12.7 million to fund his plans. Was he asking for too much? Well, this may come off as a surprise, but Thompson didn't just get the attention of some small business owners. Some of the city's biggest companies at the time were planning to invest in Nemo. One of these big companies was the owner of a local newspaper called the Columbus Dispatch. He gathered the funds and created Recovery Limited. This was a project that was determined to find the sunken ship once and for all. This was also the main reason all those big companies invested in the first place. Thompson's hard work wasn't paid off anytime soon, though. There were many trial-and-error expeditions, starting from the coast of South Carolina in 1986. He used advanced technology, cameras of all kinds, and sonars to find the shipwreck. It took him 2 whole years to hit the jackpot of a lifetime. The wreckage was largely intact, with large sections of the hull, boilers, and paddle wheels visible on the ocean floor. But Thompson admired the SS Central America only for a little bit. The real treasure was in the cargo. Celebrations over at Recovery Limited were cut short when they realized how painstakingly long the actual recovery process was. The gold was scattered over a very wide area, buried under layers and layers of sediment and debris. Thompson and his team used remotely operated vehicles to excavate the site carefully, ensuring that both the treasure and the ship's remains were preserved for study. This entire process took a bunch of expeditions to retrieve all the gold they could. But as soon as they got what they wanted, the news hit all over the world, and all the support Thompson once had turned into legal trouble fast. Big companies were fighting over ownership of the gold and threatened to take legal action. Multiple parties, including insurance companies that had paid out claims on the lost gold back in the 19th century, laid claim to the treasure. All this legal trouble was painting Thompson as the bad guy, and his achievement was being completely overshadowed. $300 million worth of gold was what Thompson and his team owned. What were they left with after all the trials over the years? Well, most of the gold retrieved was sold to a marketing group in 2000 for around $50 million. The 161 investors who were promised a fair share of the proceedings never received them. 2 of them even sued. They all wanted their hands on the treasure, even though, technically, that was never mentioned in the paperwork. One of the most prominent claims came from the insurance companies that had originally paid out claims on the lost gold back in 1857, when Central America sank. These companies argued that since they had compensated for the loss over a century earlier, they were entitled to the recovered gold. Thompson was accused of mismanaging funds, and he struggled to keep up with all these lawsuits. This was by far the last thing he imagined how things would take a turn. Most companies even said that Thompson sold the gold and kept most of the profits for himself. Some even say that he never revealed the actual amount of gold that was retrieved from the expedition. In 2012, a federal judge issued a warrant for Thompson's arrest after he failed to appear in court during one of the many ongoing legal proceedings. By this time, he was slowly going off the grid, which only raised more suspicion over his activity. A nationwide manhunt was in pursuit. Tommy Thompson was now a wanted man. He went into hiding for 3 years with his longtime companion, Allison Antikyre. During this time, he lived a cash-only life so that no credit card transactions could be traced by the government. Rumors said that he was living the life of his dreams with all the gold he stole from insurance companies. If only they knew that this was far from the truth. In 2015, the U.S. Marshals Service finally caught up with him at a Hilton in West Boca Raton, where he and his partner had been living for 2 years. They paid in cash and used a fake name to avoid getting any unwanted attention from the staff or local Florida police. Thompson was arrested and later sentenced to prison for contempt of court due to his failure to account for the missing gold and his refusal to cooperate with authorities. Even after his arrest, many questions remained unanswered about the full extent of the treasure recovery and where the missing portion of the gold might be. Thompson didn't say a word to the law enforcers. It was as if this whole period was a test of his sanity. Businesses and some of the biggest names in America had his back before looking for the sunken ship. Ever since he retrieved gold, the nation turned its back on him. Now, he did make a lot of money from the project, but because he had to stay off the radar, pay lawyers, and cover legal costs, he was left with very little. Thompson could no longer recognize himself because the people around him quite literally ruined his life. When making the arrest, warrants were issued to search his Vero Beach mansion. They found prepaid disposable phones and $10,000 in cash. There was also a book called How to Live Your Life Invisible. Inside the book, Thompson highlighted a part that said, "To live your life in cash only." If he were to ever use credit cards, his location could easily be traced. After all, he was the Edward Snowden of his time. When Thompson was arrested, he pleaded guilty to failure to appear in court back in 2012. For that, he was sentenced to up to 2 years behind years, along with a $250,000 fine. Many people suggest that this amount is exaggerated and unjust. The state was just trying to get their few crumbs of gold. He also never told the judge where he hid 500 missing coins that the investors claim are theirs. Because of this, he's been compiling fines that are $1,000 a day. The craziest part is that this legal battle has been going on ever since the expedition. During the pandemic, the judge denied Thompson's request for release because of the COVID-19 virus. Even his lawyers weren't acting right in his case and denied any knowledge of his other legal matter. The thing is, Thompson has hired a bunch of lawyers over the years. The main one that defended him for years, Richard Robohl, was suspended by the Virginia State Bar. Turns out, Robohl was found guilty for misconduct regarding Thompson's case. Apparently, he committed multiple violations of the rules of professional conduct. This made Thompson's image look 10 times worse to the public. At this point, people didn't know whether to think of him as a good man or a thief. Ever since 2015, he has been in a jail cell. His own passion for ships and treasure turned him into a nationwide criminal. The justice system didn't do him any justice. The location of some of the gold remains a mystery to this day. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more content.